Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today and for supporting children and families across Arizona. Today, as we celebrate Adoption Month, we want to come together and talk about different adoption efforts and foster care efforts statewide. My name is Maria Cristina Fuentes. I am the director of the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family, and I'm joined by John J. Van Ness of the John J. Enrich Show and the LoveUp and LovePup Foundation. We are also joined today by our First Lady, Mrs. Angela Ducey, Director Michael Faust of the Department of Child Safety, Suzan Brown, an adoptive parent, Tyler Johnson, lead pastor of Redemption Church, and Katie Odell from AZ127. We're going to be talking through our partners' experiences as it relates to supporting parents, adoptions, different needs that we see across the state, and how each and every one of you can come together with us to help support parents and build families across our state. So first, it is my great honor to be able to introduce to you our First Lady, Mrs. Angela Ducey. Mrs. Ducey and Governor Ducey are two of the greatest champions I have known when it comes to supporting families and supporting children, especially in our great state of Arizona, but across the country. They have been leaders in this effort. They are leaders in supporting those who need us the most. And for me, it's been one of the greatest honors of my career to be able to work alongside Mrs. Ducey in supporting children and supporting families and championing all of the amazing work that you're going to hear about today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Ducey for welcome.
Thank you so much, Maria. I appreciate the warm introduction. I also want to say a special thank you to John Jay for being with us today, and also to your beloved Blake, who's not with us, but for all the work that she does as well, and everyone at the LoveUp Foundation. So thank you for helping to host this event today. For Doug and I, the work to protect and improve the lives of children within the foster care system is, and as well as those at risk of entering the foster care system, is deeply personal. We've seen firsthand the devastating effects of adverse childhood experiences, as well as trauma, and the incredible healing powers that can come from a well-supported and loving family. And we've seen that personally with our own experience with our beautiful, wonderful nephew, Adam. So from the very beginning of Doug's term as governor, maybe even before he ran, we both realized, because of our experience with our nephew, the crucial work that needed to be done to tackle the crisis that we were seeing in Arizona at that time within our foster care system. I'm really proud of Doug that he took that challenge head on. And in recent years, I'm very, very proud to say that Arizona has become a recognized leader in foster care reduction. We're also, we are recognized for our tremendous work of our Arizona Department of Child Safety. A big shout out to Director Mike Faust and many other partners, specifically like our partners at Arizona 127, in supporting parents finding permanent and loving homes for so many of our Arizona children that need them. And we'll learn a lot more today, supporting parents, recruiting parents, foster and adoptive. It always will be a high need in our state. It continues, and it's so important. And that's where we reach out to our faith-based partners. You are crucial in this work that we do to meet our state's goals for more foster and adoptive parents. Churches, church leaders, they're in such a unique position to support our families and support our parents. Whether you're able to offer support or mentorship or foster or adopt or all, actively participate in helping members of your congregation to become parents through foster care. So bottom line is, we need your help in any way that you can offer it. We're so incredibly grateful for the LoveUp Foundation, for all they do to help support our families in our state. Again, our Director of Department of Child Services, Mike Faust, everyone at the Arizona Department of Child Safety, an amazing, amazing department full of wonderful compassioneers. We think the world of you guys, the tireless work that you do every single day through pandemics and beyond. We're so grateful for all that work for our most vulnerable children and their families. And finally, AZ 127 and Katie Odell and Pastor Tyler, this incredible movement of churches working together to ensure that every child in Arizona has a loving home. This movement supports our churches and church leaders who in turn can support our parents. So you're going to hear a lot more today from Katie Odell at AZ 127 about the great work and support. And again, Doug and I were so incredibly thankful for this holistic approach that they bring to equip churches with tools and resources so that you guys can recruit members of your congregation and develop those thriving foster and adoptive families. And really, again, offer that support that can sustain them with that community. So I'm happy to be here, part of this great group of people that are supporting Arizona families. And thank you all for what you do. We're so grateful.
Thank you, Mrs. Ducey. Why is this so important to you personally?
Well, as I mentioned briefly in my opening remarks, my sister and her family walked through the process of fostering and adopting my nephew, her son, Adam. Gosh, I think he's 14, and I think it's been 7 years. And when you go through the process, you realize the challenges that are there, both for the children as well as the foster parents. And I just could see that there were changes that needed to be made within the process, and we needed to figure out a way to make these children our number one priority and make whatever we could do better for them, and at the same time support these families. That there's so many families, I believe, that really want to serve, but it can be a daunting process. So to figure out how we could best support them, and that's how I came to know about AZ 127.
Yeah, it's a great program. What are some things Arizonans can do to support foster parents or foster adoptive efforts statewide?
There's so many things that you can do, but I really believe that the faith-based community plays a crucial role in recruiting, and almost as important, retaining those foster families. And that's why I'm so glad we're going to hear about AZ 127 today, because they just have an amazing comprehensive program that recruits, retains, and supports. And so I would say to every person of faith, whatever your faith is, go talk to your pastor, your priest, your rabbi, your deacon, church leaders, and get them involved with AZ 127.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Mike Faust, Director of Department of Child Safety. Mike, welcome. Let's go.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me today. I'm glad to be able to talk to the needs in the community and, highlight how we as community members and members of the faith community can come alongside to serve vulnerable children and their parents well.
How can churches best walk alongside families and support them on their foster or adoption journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I often say that the needs of the community far outweigh what we as individuals can do. So I often ask people, what role would you like to play? And in some of those cases, some families are ready to adopt and ready to open their home. And some families have contemplated adoption for quite a while. And others are still early in that pre-contemplative stage, right? And they don't know what they want to do. So sometimes for those folks, it might be identifying the foster families that exist in your church and supporting them, right? How can you help those foster families support children? And then you can learn more about the system. And so I think there's all kinds of opportunities for us to come alongside and serve children, maybe as a court-appointed special advocate, as a learning mechanism, but then gain more information, more knowledge around how best to then traverse the process of becoming a licensed foster family and in potentially adopting if that's what you've been called to do.
So you've been with DCS for 5 years, you've been director for a year.
Yeah.
Have you been touched or impacted by foster care?
It's funny. My story is probably a lot different than many others. You know, I did not grow up in the serving in state government or in child welfare, but when I came to work at DCS, my first day on the job, I got partnered with the then director, Greg McKay. And instantly I had this new world thrust upon me. But when I had to look back at my own life, it wasn't new to me. I'm a removal. I grew up in Detroit. My mom had a pretty severe substance use disorder. And August 25th, 1988, I picked up and moved across the country to live with my dad. And I never really reconciled any of those challenges in my own life. And we talk about adverse childhood experiences, and you know, we didn't even know what that term was then. And so I hit 18. I'm struggling with my own addiction issues, and I get kicked out of my parents' house. And so I had this series of trials and tribulations in my own life that came from, you know, being a removal, having adverse childhood experiences, and then all of a sudden, I'm now serving as a state employee, helping the Department of Child Safety improve. And so being able to serve in this space has allowed me, one, to bring healing in my own life for things that I do in terms of the relationship reconciliation with my birth parents. I have the ability and law to serve older youth who are struggling to navigate transition to childhood because they didn't have the supports possible. So it brought healing to me. Beyond that, and as Mrs. Ducey had touched on, I'm blessed to have the single greatest job ever that one could imagine, come alongside a leadership team, here at DCS under, given the stewardship now by Governor Ducey to lead the child welfare system to bring about positive change and the most important yet most complex service that state government provides.
So what do you say to potential parents when they're looking at the system and they say, you know, that's just too hard, or I just heard these scary stories?
I say it's probably going to have some hard days in it. It will. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I don't want to pretend like everything is gold. We serve a broken community, and we're coming alongside to bring healing. For the believers, you know, for the members of the church, we know that all people are fallible, right? And so it's our opportunity to come alongside and bring about healing to birth families while supporting the vulnerable children. So it will be hard, but I will also share with you the most rewarding things that I've experienced since being here has been just the power and the healing nature of reunifying a child with their parent, or finding a forever home for an adoptive child. This pandemic has offered me the opportunity to participate in a lot of virtual adoptions. Many for our own staff members who serve in this space have also become adoptive parents. And it's just been overwhelmingly joyful to see the shift in not only the parents and what happens in their lives, but then also the healing and the positive outcomes that happen for the children that are adopted.
Mike, I think your experience, not just the professional experience that you bring to the department, your personal story and your personal experience, that combination is really powerful. I also happen to know you're very involved in your own church and with your own faith. And so I think when you put those three things together, you're in a very unique position to be able to bring together a whole lot of stakeholders and coalitions and pieces of the puzzles that support families. Can you tell us a little bit about, from that perspective as a church goer and a church member, knowing what you know, the power that you think churches can bring to the table, the support that they can bring to families from a church perspective specifically?
Maria, thanks for that question. And it's something I've thought a lot about because, and I'll use the power of the tithe as an example. A lot of people talk about, you know, our tithing as in giving financially, right? And then offerings beyond that. But I think about, imagine if we all truly believed that we had to tithe our time. And when we think about that prospect of 168 hours in a week, so I'm going to assume you have to sleep a couple of hours. So let's say everybody was going to tithe the remaining 113 hours they have of the week and gave their first and best 10%. Imagine if every believer in Arizona stood up and said, I'm going to pour 11 hours of my life into my community every single week. And we could do that in different ways. I could serve. I could be a court-appointed special advocate. I could serve at a nonprofit. And for some of those who choose to serve as foster families, the power of the believing community, that faith-based community, and the power that we possess as a body of believers is greater than we can wrap our minds around. And so when we believe and truly, through faith, step out and show what God has given us and return that to the community, the amount of positive impact and healing that we can bring, it can't be measured. And so when we think about that lens of, I might not be able to do it all by myself, but collectively, this body of believers, that is the Church of Christ in our communities, can bring about healing in a way that none of us can wrap our minds around. I think, to me, that's the challenge that I would bring to our community partners in terms of how can we stand up and fill a void. Jesus taught us that serving the children was probably the single biggest thing we can do. And foster care offers that opportunity in a way that those who are unaware of the need simply don't realize the magnitude of what we could bring as believers to serve our community.
Man, that was powerful. That was fantastic.
And what a great tie-in to.
Fantastic to go into Tyler. Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. All right, Tyler, lead pastor, Redemption Church. Welcome.
Thanks. Great to be here, John Jay.
Tell us your story.
Yeah, so Redemption Church, early in the last decade, so right about 2011, began conversations that we had been impacted nationally through looking at some other movements and churches around the country that had stepped into various different social issues, but this one of foster care was really coming to the head in the media about the need inside the state of Arizona. In the summer of 12 is when Arizona 127 formally started. And the story behind it really was the Arizona Republic at the time had been writing some articles, and there was stories about many families leaving the foster care system and just becoming overwhelmed. And a few of us, so Mission Community Church, Hillsong, and Redemption began a conversation on, it really originated with how could we step in and support families? And then really quickly, it came to this phrase of children that are in the system need families and family need support. And so we began to mobilize and call our churches to say this simple idea of if one family inside every church stepped up and the church came around and supported that one family, incredible things could happen to make more than just a dent inside the foster care system. And that now, since 2012, 8 years later, there's this incredible program that Katie's leading that is served Redemption churches. We have 10 congregations inside of Redemption and are being served day in and day out by Arizona 127. And the experiences and expertise that other churches and other faith communities are gathering along the way. And it's been a tremendous blessing. As Director Faust said, there are plenty of hard days and hard times, and it allows these churches and faith communities to come around the families that are within them, and everybody's growing through it. This idea of the words that we were reminded that Jesus said of it's better to give than it is to receive is incredibly true. And the more that people sacrifice and give themselves on behalf of these kids, their lives are being tremendously enriched.
You know, what's interesting is my wife and I were in the service at Hillsong in 2012 when this came up. And that's how our LoveUp Foundation started, was because of these services. And this is just, I feel full circle moment, right? I feel like an Oprah moment for me right now, talking to you guys about this. It's amazing. This is truly.
I remind people of Oprah quite a bit.
It's truly, it's amazing. It's very much, am I right, Katie? I mean, think about it. It was, as soon as that service was over, we went and talked to Pastor Chris and we talked to Katie. We said, we're in, I'm gonna use my radio show. What can we do to help kids in foster care? I mean, I think you said it all there, Tyler. So I think we say hello to Suzan. Suzan, you are currently, how many are you in? You have foster kids, you've adopted?
Yeah,
Welcome.
so back in 2010, my husband and I were at a point in our marriage where we wanted to start looking at starting a family. And we honestly just decided that for us, it wasn't a really important thing to have biological kids to us. So we started looking into foster care. And we fostered for about 7 years. During that time, we had 9 children come through our home. Some of those were able to go back to their biological families or to other family members. But our final 3 children that we had in our care, we have adopted. So we've closed our license since then just to care for some of their unique needs that they have in our home, but continue on this journey with them now with their biological families and continuing to build those relationships and help them deal with some of their early trauma as well.
How have you seen your church community care for you personally as a foster adoptive family?
So the one of the specific, let me tell a specific story that will just give you a snapshot. We had closed our license after our second son. He had some pretty big needs that we needed to focus on. And so we gave away all of our childcare stuff. We were just kind of focusing on these 2 kids we had in our home. And we got heard through the grapevine that one of our son's mom was pregnant. And so we had kind of the behind the scenes conversation. Well, you know, if she came into the system, would we be willing to take her? But it was very far out there. And I was in Denver visiting a friend, and I got a phone call saying this 3-month-old baby just came into care and she's a sibling of one of your kids. Would you take her? And so I called my husband and I said, baby's on the way. And I said, and we have nothing. We have no car seat. We have a car that will not fit 3 car seats. We don't have anything for this baby coming into our home, and I'm not there to help. And so through our years at Mission Community Church, involved in the foster ministry there and their foster and adoptive support group for parents, we had developed some relationships, and I called one of those families in that support group. And I, to this day, am overwhelmed by the outpouring that by that night, we had weeks of meals lined up. We had diapers and formula and clothing and a car seat. And literally by the time I got home in a few days, over the course of the next week, half of our garage was filled with 6 months worth of diapers and everything that you could ever imagine needing for a baby, just because of the church being mobilized to come alongside a family. And so that was a big leap for us to go from what we kind of had expected our family to look like for a season to be instant parents to a baby who had some really significant health and developmental needs. And we needed that support around us as we tackled just the amount of doctor appointments that we had to go to and the learning curve to care for her. So that was one, just one picture. But other than that too, just the regular reminder to us every week of that our life, Jesus has not called us to live an easy life, but to follow him. And so in doing that, that has required us to continue to take those steps out of what we thought was maybe our next step for a family and to follow him. And so, but there are a lot of hard days still as an adoptive family. There are a lot of hard days, and we need those continual reminders from our faith community of why we did this initially and why we continue to help kids and their families heal from their trauma. And then also I would say there are a wealth of expertise around us that we don't have. So we've been able to tap into people who have supported us in getting educational programs in place for our kids, or, you know, have supported us with occupational therapy, things that we don't have the personal resources for, but these people are in the church. God has given them these beautiful talents and passions and skills that they can then bring alongside and support us and our children that God has put in our home.
Tremendous. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much.
I have one quick question, if I can jump in and maybe throw it back to Mike for 1 second, because in hearing your story, it's hard not to think about how many parents are out there that may have similar stories, that may have similar needs. Mike, can you tell us just a little bit about how many foster parents would we need? How many adoptive parents would we need? And what does that need look like on an ongoing basis in our state?
I often say that the need for foster families existed before, during, and after the pandemic. So with that being said, at the present moment, there are right around 13,500 children under the age of 18 in foster care. A lot of those children, about 45% of them, 6,500 kids are placed with family members. An additional 6,000 or so kids are placed in foster homes today. So where that number constantly evolves, we definitely need more foster families at any point in time. And we usually measure that in any given year. We need to continually recruit about 1,000 to 1,200 new families every single year, because that covers for families like Suzan, who have now adopted and are no longer fostering. That way we have a steady pipeline or continuum of families. One. Number two, we always need families that are willing to serve sibling groups. The average Arizona or American household has 0.8 children. The average DCS involved family has 2.3 children. And so there's a lot of siblings involved. There are older youth who are currently residing in congregate care settings, about 1,000 of those youth that we'd love to see brought into a family-like setting and taught those transitionary age skills, how to cook, how to start to care for themselves, and you can do that better in a family-like setting in a much more supportive way. So I'd say we always target every year 1,200 new families across the state. And that demand is true every single year to compensate for those families who choose to close their license, or those families who choose to adopt and are just not ready for more foster children in their home at that time.
And Mike, that's incredible. I mean, those numbers are incredible. And I think a critical piece of what you said is how there's always going to be that high need of numbers, because ultimately when you have parents like Suzan who ultimately adopt, then that's a foster parent who is no longer likely a foster parent. So then you're going to need additional foster parents, additional adoptive parents. That's incredible. And I think there's one more question that I have for you, which I think will help us lead into having a more in-depth conversation with Katie about how AZ-127 works and what they do. And I've heard you do this before, but can you tell us and everybody watching those 4 critical ways that everyone can help support kids and families in DCS?
Yeah, and so the first one is just volunteering. And so you can become a volunteer, and whether that's connecting to a nonprofit organization, whether that is volunteering through your church ministry to help and come alongside of an adoptive or a foster family. Number 2, we'd say a court-appointed special advocate. So you can partner up with the CASA program through your local county jurisdiction. The judges get appointed and then be an advocate on behalf of a child. And that could be, being a mentor to them, connecting to them, and advocating on their behalf. The third is to foster, right? To go through the process that Katie will walk us through, come alongside a family. And I think there's something to really consider there too, which is how do you bring about shared parenting? So how do we focus not only on meeting the immediate needs for the vulnerable child, but how can we come alongside that biological parent who needs our support and our healing, right? They're struggling. It's our job to come alongside, because when possible, we want children to reunify with their parents. And then when it's not possible for those children to reunify with their parents, the fourth way would be to be an adoptive family, and whether that is to foster and then transition to an adoptive family, or if you're just interested in adopting, going through the process and becoming certified to adopt and being put on the adoption registry, specifically so we can work to try to match that family with a specific child.
It's perfect to lead into Katie. So Katie, a lot of people message me on my radio show and they said, hey, we're ready to be a foster family. I usually send them to Arizona 127. Can you tell us about you and your program and about Arizona 127.
Yeah, thanks. So I think, when we're trying to explain what is Arizona 127, a lot of times we've got to start with what the name is. So where we get that 127, it actually comes out of scripture from James 1:27. but in its most boiled down form says true religion cares for orphans, right? And in this context, vulnerable kids in our community is what scripture is calling us to do. And it isn't a question, I would even love for Tyler to jump in here, because it's not a question of for some people, really a mandate to all of us and to the church of how we are to engage in vulnerable kids in our community. And so back in 2012, when this was a conversation, it wasn't a conversation amongst these churches about should we, it was how do we? And so when we created this kind of collaborative model, this movement of churches working together across the state of Arizona to engage in caring for vulnerable kids in our community, that was always core at the heart. The heart was, how do we help the local church engage in the vulnerable kids in their community? How do we help them engage quickly? How do we help them not have to go to committee? How do we help them actually awaken to the needs? And so when we started to create the model of Arizona 127, those were the core things. We would say often that we are created by the church for the church. So our goal is to be really specific to the faith community, because if I'm being honest, churches are weird, right? Like we kind of are unique and we're particular, and we have different things that we want done or we say yes or no to. And so we wanted to create a framework that made it easy for churches to engage in creating a foster care ministry at their church. And so that's how we started and what our intent is. And so we think there is one main thing we want churches to really talk about, and that is the need of vulnerable kids in our community, and specifically those who find themselves in the Department of Child Welfare. Like, how do those kids need support and the circles around them, right? So we say children need families, families need community, and we believe that the local church is the community that can help that thrive. And so through the work we do, we want to help engage churches to create foster care and adoption ministries that help everyone get involved. Everyone can do something in foster care. That's just what Mike was talking to. This idea that there is a role for every single person within a church to play in caring for our vulnerable kids in our community.
Is that how you approach churches? Is that how you work with the churches?
Yeah, so how I work with churches is really churches kind of reach out to us, right? Or they hear about us from another pastor. Really pastor to pastor is kind of how we have grown over the years, or a recommendation like someone like yourself or Director Faust, or someone will get a call and a church will say, hey, and they'll investigate what we do and how we can serve them. We're really here to serve the local church. How we can serve them in creating their foster care ministry is our goal. So we'll sit down with the church, we'll kind of tell them the framework to be a partner of ours, and what that means and how we serve them. And that doesn't mean we're not selling anything. We don't have anything that you buy from us. It doesn't cost anything to be a partner of Arizona 127, but it is a commitment, right? We want caring for vulnerable kids to be a part of the DNA of your church. We want senior pastors and lead pastors to teach from the pulpit. We really want a commitment that you aren't a one-time kind of talk about foster care and adoption in your church, but really this thread that would run through kind of the life of your church, that caring for vulnerable kids in our community is core to who you are as a church, to the construct of your church. Heather, what would you say? What would you add to John Jay's question there?
Yeah, I just think, in talking to church leaders, it's oftentimes because there's built-in community inside faith communities, the leaders of these communities get pursued about a variety of all kinds of different issues. And so it's hard sometimes to know how you triage those requests and what's significant. And one way to break through a lot of maybe the protective mechanisms that faith leaders put up to the number of requests that come at them is pastors to talk to pastors about how significant this is, what a substantial need it really is. And there's substantial needs all over the place. But when this is right inside your backyard, a lot of times when a friend or a colleague of yours who's doing the same thing says, hey, do this, and there's an organization and a movement that really helps to simplify it for you, where you don't have to create it, produce it, and do all of it. It's enabled us to move further, faster that way than we would just as a separate outside organization, speaking to pastors who may not know who these people are, but to do it relationally through people who are doing the same thing as them.
Tyler, before we go back to Katie, because I know there's more specific details, we want to make sure we get out to churches on where churches go, what they do next. As I was hearing Suzan speaking and Mike, we often talk about challenges that parents face and making sure they know that it's not going to just be, you know, lollipops and rainbows and days at the park, that there's going to be hard times. There's going to be difficult things to do. I look at you and the work of your church, and you're really leading by example, especially in this area. What would you say to other pastors, pastor to pastor? What are the challenges that can be overcome, and what is that value add that you have seen to you personally, to your congregation, that call to action that we're here for today to get more churches to respond and act alongside AZ 127, alongside Arizona Department of Child Safety, support these families?
Yeah, I mean, I think Suzan spoke to it very directly. The nature of when you're into foster care and taking children in, many people have used, even on this call, this phrase, adverse childhood experiences. And there's these scores that come out called the ACEs score. And so many of these kids are very high in ACEs score. And just like you would speak to families of the power of a positive home for kids, how that kind of propels them to do well in life, the opposite's equally true. And so negative experiences come out negatively affect kids. And so a lot of them don't know how to control themselves emotionally. They don't understand. Some of them have physical challenges. A lot of them have challenges with abandonment or have learned things. And so a lot of times when you make the call to churches, there is a sense of like, oh, this kind of epic call, we can change the world. We can make, the difference in a life of a kid, but they're thinking through this. We can just bring them into our life as it is now. Well, the minute you bring many of these children into your home, your whole life changes. So a lot of times when people hear the reality of that, they think, well, then I definitely want to do it. They get really scared and really nervous. And this is just where I would say very specifically, the power of love to transform human individuals is stated in so many faith traditions, being proven through like brain science, which they call neuroscience, and many other studies specifically, is it doesn't just change the child, it changes you. And you really do begin to experience, Jesus said that he came and to give us life abundantly. And I have a sign in my office that really was motivated out of foster care and adoption. And it says to live abundantly is to love abundantly. And this said of the people inside of our faith communities and even our leaders, you really never experience the abundant life to the full until you're willing to live this agape love, which is sacrificial love. This sense of I'm considering the needs of others as more significant than my own life. And I think that's why living in a nation, which I feel deep blessed that we have more arguably than anybody in the history of the world, but in the happiness indexes we're really low. And a lot of times that's because we learned the power of this life that puts the needs of others as more important than your own. And when you do it, it's ruthlessly and ridiculously hard, but beyond worth it, beyond anything you could articulate with your words of how worth it really is.
So Katie, where does a church go next?
Yeah, it's easy. A church just contacts us. So someone, if you're interested and you want to talk more about this, you just email me or call me. I think we're going to provide it, but I'll tell you, it's katie@az127.org. Send me an email and let's have a conversation. That's really the next step. We're a pretty easy on-ramp to get your church started in this ministry. It is not a lot of hurdles to kind of jump over. I do want to say one thing, John, I don't know if you have another question, but you know, when we started this long ago, and I would say this is still rings true for us, the church is the sleeping giant in the life of kids. And if we can awaken the sleeping giant to the needs of kids in our community, I think we can't even imagine what it could be, the outcomes that we can change. When we talk with pastors and we talk about, you know, the kind of community outreach ministries that they're involved in, or the things that they want to help the public in, there is not often an upstream approach. But when churches engage in foster care and adoption, it really is the upstream to so much of homelessness, prison, teen pregnancy, sex trafficking. And there is this idea that when we engage in this upstream approach of foster care and adoption, we really can change outcomes long-term for kids and our community, right? And so I know that all churches have a passion to engage somewhere in that. Like normally they have a heart passion, right? But I just want for pastors to really think about, where is a foster care in that story of whatever that heart place is? Because I guarantee you will find that the core of most of our community outreach kind of ministries, the story of foster care and adoption is somewhere intertwined in that person's story, addiction, whatever it may be. You're going to hear this resounding repetitiveness that foster care was part of that. And like what Tyler said, I think when we step in with this love, we can really change outcomes for all different, not only the children, but biological families. We can help reunification. We can help kinship families who are stepping in to care for their families. We can help adoptive families long-term. We can help more people foster. Our goal is to tip the scale. We want it to be said that in Arizona, there are more families waiting for kids than there are kids waiting for families. And that's when we would know that we have succeeded and we can kind of sit down and take a rest and put our feet up. It's when the scales tip. And that's what I want to encourage churches to really step into and get into, is how can you be a part of changing the scale so that there are more families in Arizona waiting for kids than there ever are kids waiting for families.
Thank you.
That's incredible.
That's beautiful.
That's incredible. And I, you know, I love that visual of tipping those scales and the wait list, the wait line being for on the parent side and not on the child side. And I think one thing I want to echo from everything that I'm hearing from our partners today, that I've heard it today from everyone, but I've heard privately in meetings with all of these individual partners and a army of partners that are behind this group, is for every church that wants to join AZ127, partner with AZ127, with Arizona Department of Child Safety, all of us, the LoveUp Foundation, the governor's office, everyone here, and others that we work with on a regular basis are here to support you in this journey of supporting parents and recruiting parents and helping families come together. There are parents and children out there that just haven't met yet. There are families out there that just haven't met each other yet, and they need our help and your help, the help of churches all across the state, to meet each other and to become whole. And I think that's a critical role that the churches can play, and AZ127 is here to help make sure that that happens. I really am grateful, John Jay, to you for helping walk us through this day and this conversation. I know that this is a professional passion that was born from a personal passion of yours and Blake's, from your heart, from your family. So I'm very grateful to you and the support of LoveUp. To everyone on the panel, Mrs. Ducey, this is a conversation that has been raised up in Arizona because of you and the governor. We have become national leaders because of you and the governor. Former Director McKay, now Director Faust, the improvements that we've done in the Arizona Department of Child Safety, nationally recognized, but really recognized by all of those individual families who have, either come back together or become whole in a new way. So I'm just very grateful for all of the partnership, the founding pastors and churches of AZ 127 and all of those that have joined since and all of those that will join moving forward, but especially to the parents that take on this charge and this calling of fostering, of adopting. It really is because of you that children who need permanent homes can finally come home. So we're here to support you, to support the churches. And I'm just very grateful for all of the partners here today, for all of the churches that are now just eager and cannot wait to be a part of AZ 127. You can find information through our website always, but as Katie mentioned, you can email her directly. She will come out, we will come out, whatever supports you need to learn more about this journey. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find Katie at Katie, Katie, at az127.org or on the GOYFF website. We would always be happy to connect you. I want to thank all of our panelists today, all of the participants for coming together, but more especially for all of the work that you do every day to support families.